Alright, today we're going to go over lesson 38, which is dividing polynomials using long division. Now I realize for a lot of you it's been a long time since you've used long division, probably back in elementary school, but those same steps that we did way back then we can still do today. Before we do this problem on the board, say that we took and divided 526 divided by 16. Alright, how would we do that? Well, our first step would be, well, can 16 go into 5? No, it can't go into 5. 16 can go into 52. How many times can it go in? It can go in 3 times, because 3 times 16 is 48. After that, we subtract those. We end up with a 4. Then we bring down our 6. 16 does go into 46. How many times? It goes in twice. So then we'd go 2 times 16 is 32. We would have 14 left over. Now we don't have anything else to bring down. As you guys know, we could always put a decimal point and a 0. We're not interested in that. We would much rather have an exact answer, which in this case means just writing it as a fraction. So what we would do then is we would have this 14, this would become our numerator. So the 14 would go up on the top, and our 16 would go down on the bottom. Every once in a while when we do these, we do see that our fraction can be reduced. So what we'd have for an answer here is we'd have 32, and then reducing this, both of those can be divided by a 2. We'd have 32 and 7/8. Alright, now that same exact way can be done to actually solve our problem. Is it always easiest to do it that way? No, as we've talked about many times this year, I want you to find ways that make sense to you. Well, when I read this, it says, what is the other factor of this trinomial when one of the factors is x plus 6? That tells me, based on how it's worded, that I can factor this thing. And it is always going to be easier to factor than it is to divide. So, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and factor this 3x squared trinomial. 3x squared, well that means I've got a 3x and an x. This second sign is a plus, so that means they're both signs are the same. That tells us that they're both pluses. And then for 48, I've got a ton of different options to use. I can go 1 and 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, and so on. There's a lot of them. Alright, what do I do? Well, I'm given another clue as to what one of them might be. It says one of the factors is x plus 6. So put the 6 there. If this is a 6, this has got to be an 8 to be able to get our 48 here. Alright, so then we just got to check to make sure that we get a 26x in the middle. 3x times 6 is 18x, plus 8x is our 26x. So this is factored correctly, and that tells us that that is our answer, the 3x plus 8. Okay, if you see these in your homework that you can factor, do it. It's always easiest to do it that way. Alright, but not always are you going to have that. Say this one right here, I don't know if it can go in evenly. So it's going to be very similar to this one here then, where we might have a fraction left over at the end. In fact, one thing that I can tell from this problem here is 6 goes into 48. And it goes in evenly. So then I have a chance of this other factor going in evenly, and it did, as you guys can see here. But if we go to this one, does 7 go into 79 evenly? No, it goes in a little bit more than 11 times, but it doesn't go in 12 times. So then we are going to have a fraction somehow at the end. Alright, so that's an important thing to know up front, just to know what the answer is going to look like. Alright, so first step is whatever we're dividing by is going to go outside the division bar. Then we've got our division bar here. And then the other one is going to go underneath. So let's get that copied in. Now one thing to realize is if you are missing a term, say I didn't have, say it was negative 55x squared plus 79, and I didn't have this here, we still have to put this under the division bar. I'd have to put a 0x in there. Alright, so then we put all of that in there. Now, just like before, our question is, well, how many times does this go into that? Well, we're not even going to use this whole thing. We're only going to use the first part. So how many times does x go into 3x to the fourth? X times 3x cubed gives us 3x to the fourth, so that's how many times it goes in. So I am going to put this 3x cubed up here above, because 3x cubed times x gives us 3x to the fourth. And that now goes away. Alright, now a couple things to realize is first, I put this 3x cubed above the x cubes. It's just to keep us organized. The more organized you can be with this, the easier it's going to be for you. Alright, because then as we go across here, whenever we get our answer for here, and then we come down here and we have a remainder or something, whatever that thing is left over, once we get here, this has to be our remainder, so then that goes up in the numerator. Another thing to realize is, yes, we took this 3x cubed times the x to get this, but we also have to take the 3x cubed times 7 to get a 21x cubed. Now realize, just like in long division of just regular numbers, we have to subtract these. So instead of just having this minus for just this one part, it's going to be for the whole thing. So I've got 3x to the fourth minus 3x to the fourth. That gives me a 0. 11x cubed minus 21x cubed gives me a negative 10x cubed. Our next step is to drop our next one. So we drop this negative 55x squared. How many times does x go into this? This will be a negative 10x squared. Then we've got to take this negative 10x squared times x to get us a negative 10x cubed. Notice when we do this, these two should be exactly the same so we can cancel them out. Negative 10x squared times 7 is a negative 70x squared. Then we subtract those. Negative 10 minus negative 10, negative 10 plus 10 gives us a 0. Negative 55 minus negative 70, negative 55 plus 70 gives us a positive 15x squared. Then we drop our next one. There's our 113x squared, or sorry, just an x. X goes into 15x squared 15x times. Multiply those out, we get 15x squared. 15x times 7 is 105x. Once again, we subtract, those go away. 113 minus 105 is 8x. Bring down our 79. X goes into 8x, 8 times. 8 times x is 8x. 8 times 7 is 56. Positive 56. We subtract those, this goes away, and then 79 minus 56 gives us a 23. And then what we do with that is this 23, we put up here into the numerator, so we're going to have to add our 23 over x plus 7. And this whole thing then is the answer to our original problem. Lots of work, but if you notice, it is the same steps for every single one of these. Figure out how many times x goes into the original. put it up above. This times x gives us that. This times this gives us that. Subtract, this goes away. This minus this gives us that, and then we do the same thing over and over and over again until we get all the way to the end of the problem. Once we get to the end, our remainder goes up here into the numerator, and then whatever we divided by ends up being our denominator. Alright, let's do another one here. Alright, this one's a little bit different. Alright, first of all, we're dividing by an x squared. Alright, how is that going to look? Well, we start the same way. Now you can do it one of two ways. You can either go x squared, and remember I said, if we don't have a term, we got to fill it in. You can either fill it in right here with a 0x plus 3, or in this case, you could probably just get rid of the 0x here because it'll take care of the rest of it up in the other one. Okay, it's not going to hurt though to leave it in there. I'm going to leave it in there. Alright, so from here we've got 4x to the 4th plus 8x cubed minus 55x squared plus 24x. And then we've got to plug in a 0 term there. Alright. How many times does x squared go into 4x to the 4th? It goes in 4x squared times. Realize I'm coming way over here this time to put it above the x squareds. 4x squared times x squared is 4x to the 4th. 4x squared times 0 is 0, x cubed. 4x squared times 3 is a positive 12, x squared. Remember, we subtract these, this goes away. 8 minus 0 is 8x cubed. Negative 55 minus 12 is negative 67, x squared. We drop our next one. X squared goes into 8x cubed, 8x times 8x times x squared is 8x cubed. 8x times 0x is 0x squared. 8x times 3 is 24x. From here, we subtract these. That goes away. Negative 67 minus 0 is negative 67 x squared. 24 minus 24 is 0. This also goes away. That's interesting. Sometimes that's going to happen and sometimes it doesn't. Then we can also drop this 0 and do it one more time. How many times does x squared go into negative 67 x squared? That's a negative 67 times. Negative 67 times x squared is negative 67x squared. Negative 67 times 0 is 0x. Negative 67 times 3 is negative 201. Alright, then we gotta subtract these. Negative 67 plus 67, that goes away. 0 minus 0, that goes away. 0 minus negative 201 is a positive 201. So then we're going to add in here we're going to add in 201 over what we divided by, which was this x squared plus 3. I know we divided by this x squared plus 0x, but we don't truly need that in there when we write down our answer. This would be more simplified, so this is more correct. So there is our answer to this problem. Once again, it's doing the same steps over and over and over and over again. All right. One more. Is x plus 6 a factor of 4x cubed plus 73x plus 105? Well, you know what the very first step I would do is, does 6 go into 150? If it does, then you have a chance of it working. If it doesn't, then it will not work at all. 6 does go into 150 25 times. So then we've got to actually go through and figure this out. This one does not look like it would be factorable, at least not very easy. You might be able to factor it, but it's not something that's going to pop out at you. So what I would try and do is I would try and divide them out again. Okay, and now what we are looking for is we're looking to see if x plus 6 goes into this one completely evenly, so no remainder. Also realize here that when we're dividing this out, I don't have an x squared term, so I gotta put in a 0x squared here. Alright, so then we divide them out, x divided by this, or x times what goes into this? That'd be a 4x squared times. 4x squared times x is 4x cubed. 4x squared times 6 is 24x squared. Subtract these out, that goes away. 0 minus 24 is negative 24x squared plus 73x when we bring this down. X goes into negative 24x squared, a negative 24x times negative 24x times x is negative 24x squared. Negative 24x times 6 is negative 144, I believe, I hope. Then we subtract these, those go away. We subtract these and we get, what is that? 73 plus, that would be 217x. We drop the 150, and then we do it again. X goes into that 217 times. 217 times x is 217x. 217 times 6 is not going to be 150. It's, what is that? 2031. Okay, so we're not going to get a 0 down here. Alright, we would get something much larger than that. So is x plus 6 a factor of this? No. Alright, you do have to show your work though to be able to show that to me, that it doesn't work, but that, I mean, that's what we're looking for right there, is that it is not a factor of the other. These do take a lot of work. You're going to have to practice these. Any questions, let me know.